Welcome back to the Hard Truth Distilling Company studios on this Thursday. Coach Shannon Griffith with us as usual. And Coach, I think you heard a little bit of snippet that I was playing there from yesterday's meeting with the college football playoff executive director, Rich Clark, in which they went over a lot of things, how it's set up that people may not know. The bowl games are still a part of this. The 6 big-time bowl games, they're folded into the quarterfinals and the semifinals, and there is proximity. They're going to honor the contracts that certain conferences have, like with the Rose Bowl, for instance. The Rose Bowl will get, because they're a part of that first group of games. Is, let's say, the Big Ten champion, if it's Oregon will play in the Rose Bowl. Now, and who they play, that's going to be simply determined on the rest of how it plays out. It will have nothing to do with the Big Ten, because now, if you realize, Oregon's part of the Big Ten, so they would be actually the Big Ten representative into for the Rose Bowl at the same time. So it's killing two birds with one stone. Then it just kind of if there are like 3 bowls that don't have tie-ins. Fiesta Bowl, I don't think they have a tie-in, for example, and they go by proximity. So so that's how that's going to work.
Big 12 will probably tie into the Fiesta Bowl because the majority are in that middle Midwest, or however you want to call it.
Indiana now, they head to East Lansing this weekend. This is the last game before the college football playoff poll does come out, which is next Tuesday. Looking forward to that. And, there has been already, we've seen brand bias against Indiana. It sure sounds like I'm crying over some sour grapes here. But I don't think, I think that I'm being realistic, because I look at these numbers every day. I'm studying these stats. Indiana is in every stinking category that you can fathom. It's blowing my mind. I'm looking something up. I'm like, damn, they're up here too. Every category. When I saw that they were even in the top 4 of net punting, I'm like, I give up. I'm like, they're only punted 15 times, but when they do it well.
Yep.
So it's going to be difficult because a 10-2 Ohio State team, I see still getting into the CFP. There's no such thing as a 10-2 Indiana team getting into the CFP. I've been back and forth on the 11-1. If they lose to Ohio State, everyone's still going to say, well, who did you beat? Because you won't have beaten a single ranked team all year long.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's the perfect storm, because if you did the blind test and you put a team up that listed all the teams that were undefeated and all the teams that were 1 loss and 2 loss, you would say all the teams that are undefeated that are there, that nobody knows who they are your 1 through whatever. Okay. And when you pulled it back and you found out that Indiana is in front of A&M, LSU, Ohio State, and I mean, you could go down the list and they're ready to be up in arms. Why is Indiana ahead of all these teams? Well, because they're 8-0. They're top in the country on a multitude of things. They've beat Nebraska and Washington. And while nobody at the beginning of the season thought Nebraska and Washington both would have 3 losses, but they thought those 2 games were going to be the most important games to determine whether Indiana was going to be good or not. Now, all of a sudden, Nebraska's not any good. Well, Ohio State's had to score with 6 minutes left in the 4th quarter to beat them. That matters when you look at commonalities. Indiana blew out Nebraska. Ohio State struggled. Why is Ohio State ahead of Indiana in any poll? And people are going to say, well, because it's Ohio State. Well, to clarify, what is Ohio State? It's the brand. It's the brand. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying it's a cheat.
I am. It's damn sure wrong.
No, I get you. But what I'm trying to get to is that for every argument people are going to argue why Indiana shouldn't be, you could argue against the team that you think should, in terms like Ohio State, Notre Dame, whatever. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. They should not be in the top 12. I know they had one good win against Texas A&M. That doesn't preclude them from not being in the top 12 at the end of the year. But right this moment, that's really the only team they have beaten. Now they're going to say, well, they beat ranked teams. Give me a break. Navy, Army, and I'm sorry, don't count, in my opinion, because there's another scenario of quote unquote brand awareness aspect of things. Notre Dame has gotten away with many years of scheduling these scheduled that they get, and they do not play any top opponents, and they essentially have to go undefeated to get in. And until Notre Dame is forced to join a conference where they're going to play week in, week out top conference teams and fight it out to see where they find in the conference, I just don't think the argument of them being a one-loss team is a bona fide qualifier for them to be in the college football playoffs. I just don't. And when you lose to Northern Illinois, who gets beat by my alma mater this weekend, I'm sorry, but that is a horrible loss. And the Texas A&M win does not fully redeem them, even though it was at A&M, which gives them a lot of stock. So I know it creates a lot of water cooler talk, and it's great to be in the conversation because we would normally hide about this time of year around the water cooler when you talked about the college football playoffs. But like I said on Monday on my podcast, if you want to control your own destiny, which Indiana is doing at the present moment, you win out. And then you are firmly seated at the front at the table for the college football playoffs, irregardless of what happens in any type of championship game. You go 11-1, but lose to Ohio State. Depending on what that loss looks like, it's an iffy proposition if they get in above an Ohio State team that may go into that game against Indiana with 2 losses. We're going to find out this weekend against Penn State because the first eliminator is head-to-head, but if you have a 2-loss team versus a 1-loss team, normally you take the 1-loss team over a 2-loss team, irregardless of the head-to-head, because the record is better. It goes by winning percentage then. So you get into a lot of dynamics, a lot of arguments, those rooms where these people are doing this discussion. Not all of them are football people, which in some cases is good, in some cases is bad. It's who are the personalities in that room that are controlling the discussion.
Absolutely, and we'll see how
we'll find out
because it's coming up. But like you said, there's one very, very easy way to resolve that. Just beat Ohio State.
Yeah.
And a lot easier said than done, granted. But I'll be honest with you. I think that Indiana is better than Ohio State. They are a much more complete team.
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State having problems with their offensive line right now. They are not scoring a ton of points. How they are favored at Penn State, please somebody tell me. I don't think Penn State's all that great. Their defense is really good, but their offense has also been very stale and stagnant. So
plus, the quarterback
got hurt. Be a 24-21 game or something. This is not going to be a high scoring game, I don't think.
Well, it all depends on Penn State's quarterback because he got hurt at Wisconsin, if memory serves me correct. And I don't think he played in that second half all that much. They had their backup in, so they may be facing a little bit what Indiana faced a week ago in terms of how Ohio State's in front of them. Ohio State's a funny team to look at because you look at them and they've got all these 4 stars, 5 stars, and this and that, and they haven't played a very overall complete game. They botched the Oregon game in some respects in terms of clock management. I'm not quite sure what to think of them, but it will be interesting to see how all this. Joel Klatt, who, again, he's seen IU with his own eyes. He's seen Ohio State with his own eyes. And he's basically said, the AP poll is nothing but a bunch of, well, you can fill in the rest. BS is what he said, because there is the same thing that you're saying. There's a brand awareness in the minds of those media people, and especially the ones that are in the South or in the East or West, that they're pushing their own agendas with their opponent, the teams that they are covering from those different areas. So again, snapshot in time will happen Tuesday. That doesn't mean that will be the final snapshot. It'll be great to have this conversation when we're playing Ohio State if Indiana walks in there undefeated and Ohio State has maybe 2 losses, because that will be the key component. Because at least at that time, you got to think if Indiana walks into Ohio State undefeated, that irregardless of what may or may not happen there, the thing of it is that Indiana almost has a game in hand in that regard, because of you think they're going to finish 11-1, and therefore it's going to get messy at the end of the year anyway, with some of these dynamics that we're all facing with tiebreakers and all the things that you get into. So it's only going to be an argument to expand it to 16.
Well, yeah, but there's a gigantic game this weekend.
Oh, man.
And Ohio State. So right there, that's going to, if Ohio State takes a loss, they're in grave danger.
Oh yeah. To me, they're done, but that's me.
Oh, no. If they beat Indiana, if they lose to Penn State, but beat Indiana,
yeah, that's true.
They will be in the college football playoffs. Yep. Mark that down.
Well, here's another thing too, that, Indiana's going to this game this weekend against Michigan State. Childs, the quarterback for Michigan State, makes defensive coordinators very nervous because of what he can do, throwing the ball and running it. And Indiana, being that they're a pressure team, they're going to have to do something to cage him in, because if he gets loose on them, it's a problem. But the thing that Indiana has in their favor against Michigan State has been very turnover prone. He's thrown 9 picks on the year, I believe. They've had 7 fumbles.
That's why he runs all the time.
Yeah, well, and he makes poor decisions with the football. The Michigan game, for instance, was one, and the other one was against Ohio State. But understand this, they are 3-1 at home this year. They pounded Iowa. Now, Iowa kept them out of the end zone where they had to kick 4 field goals inside the 20. But had they scored on half of them, that game would have been a complete blowout, because they kicked their, up and down the field. So this by no means is a walk in the park for Indiana. Michigan State is one of those teams, if they get hot, they can be very scary. But they also have a tendency to stumble over themselves, but they are definitely a much better home team than they are on the road, because on the road, they've only had 1 win.
Well, and I'd say most teams are, but that's not the case for everybody.
No. I mean,
actually, Indiana, I think some of Indiana's numbers are higher on the road, which is crazy.
No, I get you. But that's the dynamics of it all. And that's why it's great to talk about the playoffs, but man, oh man, you got to take care of business. And the only way to do that is control your own destiny and win.
Penn State, Ohio State. What are your thoughts on that game? It's in Happy Valley. Mm-hmm. Penn State also having a quarterback, Drew Allar. Is he back? Is he out?
I don't know. I haven't seen anything officially being thrown around, and James Franklin is a very, very, I think the word is hyperactive coach that does not like things getting out from his communication process. So ideally, we're probably not going to know until game time, until they release the availability reports. But if they have him, I think that they are capable on all fronts of beating Ohio State. If they don't have him, I don't know. It'll depend on Penn State's defense, which is playing very good football right now. I mean, they're the ones that kept him in the game at Wisconsin and gave him a chance to win with some key turnovers, and I think they had a pick 6 as well. And they're playing very good football. That is the strength of their team, and an offense that can beat you up. So just Ohio State is just so hard to read this year. And I just don't know. They just don't jump off the screen at you as consistently as they have in the past when you've watched them. It's like, oh my God, nobody will stop them, but this year, just like, I don't know what it is. It's just a weird dynamic. Ryan Day got out of the play calling business. He turned that over to Chip Kelly. I'm sorry. And if you watch his antics on the sideline, I believe his blood pressure is up all the time now. He goes ballistic on the sideline. You can tell he's under a lot of pressure at Ohio State. Because just the way he acts on the sideline, you can tell he's overly animated, and that's not Ryan Day.
All this talk about Indiana's schedule. Well, my question would be, who the hell has Penn State beat? Yeah, okay, they beat Illinois 21-7, who got throttled by Oregon in the first half alone. Penn State beats UCLA 27-11 at home. They have to go to overtime to beat USC. These are bottom dwelling, not Illinois, but USC, UCLA, bottom dwellers in the conference.
I think with the way
your schedule's this much better, it's not enough better that I'm like, get on. What's the deal, guys?
Yeah, and that's what I said. If you did a blind draw and you put everybody's statistics next to each other, Indiana would be ahead of a lot of people. But because they're Indiana and they don't have the storied tradition and history in football that some of these other teams do, they're always going to be fighting an uphill battle when it comes to notoriety in the mainstream media of college sports. Now, they're getting that because it's a fascinating story and what Coach Cignetti has done. At the end of the day, though, it's almost like, wait a minute, you're not welcomed at the big table yet. Sit over there at the kids' table. Even though you're, where you're at, it's still not breaking into some of these storied tradition programs that in some respects monopolizes the air in the room, like Notre Dame does, and like, Michigan would if they were in the position better than they are, and Ohio State and Penn State and some of these teams. I mean, look at Oregon. They're really good. And it's almost like people wonder why they're number one over Georgia, and Georgia's got one loss. So it's going to be interesting. Indiana just has to go win, baby. And it's great that it seems that Curtis Rourke is coming back, and that makes things a lot better. And, this is where Cignetti earns his money. The noise is happening on the outside about Indiana. There's talk about college playoffs. There's talk about how they're getting screwed in the rankings and things of that nature. And he will block that out of the room come hell or high water, because he's not about that stuff. He is about the process, and
he's about the hard truth, baby.
That's right. He does not, and he keeps the chip on the kid's shoulder. You see it each and every week, the way they play, and he will continue that all the way up until the end of the season. And then he'll decide whether or not it's appropriate for him to discuss the college football playoffs, but he will not even give it any air. And he will make sure the kids don't give it any air.
There's Coach Griffith. You'll hear him again. You can also hear him with Hoosier Tailgate. Make sure you go there. I believe that's tonight.
Yep, tonight, 7:30, we'll go through the Michigan State scouting report, and I get scared when I watch their tape because this quarterback makes me nervous, but we'll talk about it tonight.
Probably going to be a closer game than people think, but we shall see. But make sure you join us Saturday after the game for the Hard Truth Indiana Football Postgame Show with Coach Griffith and myself.
You got it.
We'll see what are the special guests we may be able to come up with.
You never know.
Appreciate you, brother.
All right, partner. We'll see you. Have a great rest of the day.